Hey guys, this is Comic Uno and Comic Frontline, and today I'm doing Comic Uno episode 220, and this show where I review all the comics I read this week in one show. We got worst pick of the week and best pick of the week and everything in between, so let's get started. I had a moderate amount of comics this week, 18 books. So what was number 18? What was worst pick of the week this week? And that was X-Men Blue issue 17. Weird because X-Men Gold was worse last week. And now this week is X-Men Blue. So this issue, I feel like if you're a 2009 fan, you're probably going to get the most joy out of it, but other than that, it feels really fillerish, and not a lot actually happens with our X-Men Blue crew, besides like, oh, you know, we're time traveling, trying to figure out where we're from, and then in the end, they think they're at the place where they're from, and obviously they're not, so just, like, it's not a lot of story for our main characters, and just kind of more of, like, a fan servicey issue for the people that like 2009, and I'm not a big 2009 fan. And also the artwork, I felt like everyone looked really small, there wasn't a lot of detail, because there was so much going on, it just kind of felt crowded. So X-Men Blue issue 17, for me, gets 2 stars, and that is number 18. Now, moving on to number 17, which is Supergirl issue 16. So, you know, I'm still not a big fan of this. I just feel like the whole DEO slash Supergirl dynamic of them, you know, going up against each other there's not a lot of punch there, because I feel like that wasn't really developed very well. I still feel, even though I feel like Supergirl is getting a bit more of her old characteristics, there's still not enough personality there for me to be really driven by the series. And also the artwork I actually did like, but the coloring's kind of damp in the book, and it should be brighter for a Supergirl book, so still not a big fan of this one. So Supergirl issue 16 gets 2 stars. Moving on to number 16, which is The Amazing Spider-Man issue 792, which is definitely a weaker part 2 compared to part 1, where I feel like there's more character moments, more surprises. Here it's like putting the pieces together. We get to see an, I guess, interesting interaction between Eddie and Flash, but I guess the most entertaining part was actually seeing Peter and Flash interacting with each other. Peter deflecting is like, oh, you know, I'm in Spider-Man's apartment, or Peter's apartment, I think it actually was, because I know Peter and we're friends, don't worry about it. So that was fun, but obviously he's like, why are they in Peter's apartment? It's just obviously for plot convenience. So I feel like that could have been a bit better, but it's still kind of fun to see them interacting. And I did like the Betty moment where Peter has to take a phone call from Betty, but does it because Flash is in the room. And obviously Flash and Betty have a history, and Spider-Man knowing Betty's like, how is that possible? So it's cool as we get to see them tiptoe around Peter and Spider-Man being the same person. You wonder if Flash will know. But everything else, like, I didn't really care about the villain. I don't care if Black Cat's becoming like this venom creature. I feel like that's kind of weird and mustache twirly, but it was an okay issue, just again, not as good as issue 1. So the Amazing, or part 1, The Amazing Spider-Man issue 792 gets 2.5 stars. Moving on to number 15, which is She-Hulk issue 160. Been really disappointed with this new run of She-Hulk. I know I was in the minority, but I actually liked Hulk, and here it's just, there's not even a lot of She-Hulk. It's more about this woman, Robin, who's not even the villain. She's like a side villain who's the pawn of the leader pretty much, and she's so flip-floppy where she says, oh, I love the Hulk, I've been following your career forever, and then she's like, but I must kill you because you don't know how to use the Hulk. I just feel like that train of thought could have been executed better. Not saying it's a bad train of thought, I mean, it's understandable, but just kind of felt out of place the way they did it, and kind of random the way it was revealed, and most of it's just execution. I just wasn't a fan of this. The artwork is plain, so yeah, overall I'm going to give She-Hulk issue 160 2.5 stars. I've been really disappointed with She-Hulk so far. Alright, moving on to number 14, which is the penultimate issue of Superwoman, which has always been kind of this weird book to me. Sometimes I love it and I want to love it because I love Lana as Superwoman, but a lot of times I just don't know what direction this book is going. Because it ends in a way that's so repetitive, a storyline we've already saw, I think right before the original creative team left this book where Superwoman's like, I'm gonna give up my powers to save everybody. And I don't love the idea that she's gonna give up her powers, because it just feels like the series in general would be null and void. Like, I'm okay with her having her own adventures off panel, but I feel like if she's not Superwoman anymore and have this kind of brooding, angsty exit, it's not inspiring, especially the way it was written. I feel like there's a way to make, you know, a martyr type superhero exciting and inspiring, but it just wasn't here. The dialogue wasn't there for me, and the reasonings just weren't there for me with the villain. I feel like it wasn't this life or death situation. She has to, like, touch this globe thing to convert her powers. I feel like that could have been stronger, those stakes, and maybe I would enjoy this arc a little bit more, but a little disappointed with this penultimate issue. So I'm going to give Superwoman issue 17 2.5 stars. And we'll see how this one ends. Alright, moving on to number 13, which is Detective Comics issue 970. It's an okay issue. Obviously still don't love Stephanie's motives, even though there's some touching moments between Tim and Stephanie. In the end, she's like, I'm gone, you don't trust me. And there's just not a ton that happens here. It's definitely more character moments in this issue. I like the Batwoman moments probably the most with her father, but it's very scattered. They try to fit a little bit too much in this issue, so you don't have a lot of substance in it. And also wasn't a huge fan of the artwork. So Detective Comics issue 970 gets 2.5 stars. Moving on to we're up to number 12, which is Action Comics issue 993, which is an okay issue. I mean, I feel like some of the stuff we've seen before with Superman going back to Krypton, but it's not actually his Krypton. We've seen that before, obviously, and I would say you probably enjoy this issue, depending on how much you are of a Booster Gold fan. I'm not a Booster Gold fan at all, so it's just kind of underwhelming for me. But the parts I did like was definitely the lowest part, where she finds out about her father and is going to do anything in her power to save her father. So I'm excited for that mission and how John's going to be related to that mission, because he overhears about his grandfather and doesn't know his grandfather. So that was definitely the most exciting point of the issue. Pencils are strong. Coloring could be better, so overall I'm going to give Action Comics issue 993 3 stars. Moving on to number 11, which is Wonder Woman issue 36. And I would say this could have been a lot higher just if they just focused on Jason and Wonder Woman. I feel like the dialogue was okay for their interactions, even though the plot was really good. It's, you know, these two kind of strange siblings hashing it out, and maybe Jason kind of going towards Wonder Woman's side. And I did like the cliffhanger. Zeus comes down, and we'll see the whole father-daughter slash son dynamic we're gonna have here. But the dark side stuff was okay, and the stuff that really dragged it down was Giganta, Steve, and Amanda Waller. I don't think those scenes need to be in this issue at all. But the artwork's strong. Again, it's a middle ground book that should have been even higher with the stuff they had. So Wonder Woman issue 36 gets 3.5 stars. Moving on to number 10, which is Jughead The Hunger issue 2, which has some really good moments in this issue, but never really fully fleshed out. So it's a lot of like small moments that make this issue. So I liked Archie teaming up with the Cooper family. That was a lot of fun, and him just learning to be a werewolf hunter. The Jughead stuff is a little underwhelming. It's him still being like, I'm a werewolf, where do I go? And the stuff I wish I wanted to like a bit more, if there was more explanation towards, was the Veronica and Reggie stuff. Because in the first issue, the cliffhanger was that Veronica was being attacked by Reggie, and now she's just like best friends with Reggie. How? Is she a werewolf? Is she not a werewolf? What's happening? So I kind of wish we had more answers. I just feel like there was missing time. I felt like I missed an issue. That's kind of what it felt like with this issue. Hopefully, hopefully more is explained with the next issue, but we will see. So Jughead issue, or Jughead The Hunger issue 2 gets 3.5 stars, and that is number 10. Now we're moving on to number 9. Very dusty. Anyways, just the air is very dry. Alright, going on to number 9, which is Batgirl in the Birds of Prey issue 17. So this issue is definitely a big improvement from what we were getting from this arc. Finally we get motivation from Patient Zero. I feel like the voices of the other female characters are better with this issue. And it's just fun, you know, even though it's kind of this really filler story arc, it was a fun ending to an okay story arc. So Batgirl in the Birds of Prey issue 17 gets 3.5 stars. Moving on to number 8, which is Titans, issue 18. And definitely the best part of this is Donna. You know, Donna going head on against her future and you know, her fears. From Titans Annual issue 1, she learned her origins, that she's not a real person, and she's been scared about that. And we do get to see some returns. Wally returns. We get to see some romances rekindled. We get to see Bumblebee gets her memories back, so everything's going back to status quo and could bring a more positive light to the Titans and hopefully just more interactions between the Titans together, you know, as a team. So Titans issue 18 gets 3.5 stars. Also, the art change was kind of weird because we did get the last artist, we got another guest artist, and then we had Brett Booth the issue before. So it's Brett Booth, another artist, and then Brett Booth again. So that kind of ruined the flow a bit, but yeah, so overall I'm going to give this 3.5 stars. Moving on to number 7, which is Bloodshot Salvation issue 4. At first I felt this was a little jarring because we get a totally different storyline of our villain. And I was like, oh, but I want to go back to Magic and you know, her husband and the daughter, and I want to see that. But in the end, Jeff Lemire makes such a fleshed out villain where you care about them. You understand why they're doing the things they're doing. So it was a very solid issue, even though it wasn't what I expected. That's kind of what makes this title fresh. It's never what you expect, and it's still a good book. So Bloodshot Salvation issue 4 gets 4 stars, and that is number 7. Moving on to number 6, which is Mr. Miracle issue 5, which at first, like, is very psychedelic. I mean, the whole book is very psychedelic, but I really enjoy just kind of these weird moments in the issue where, you know, Mr. Miracle is pretty much living his last days, and Barter can't really handle it because this is her husband and she doesn't want to lose her husband, but the way they portray it is very weird because their dynamic is kind of weird, and I love that car scene where he's like, oh, we should have a song. And he said, what do we used to listen to? And Barter's like, well, we used to listen to screams. And they're just like listening to people screaming and being tortured, and they're laughing about it. So there's those interesting moments in the issue that really make this book. But then again, it's kind of a book I feel like you need to read multiple times to totally get it. And also, I think you need a bit of history with the character. That's always been a little bit of a complaint with Mr. Miracle. It's not completely new reader friendly, but still a really well written and drawn book, and a really well structured book. So Mr. Miracle issue 5 gets 4 stars, and that is number 6. Now moving on to number 5, which is Hack & Slash vs. Vampirella issue 3, which is probably the best issue of the series so far. I like that we get to see it in the point of view of Queen of Hearts, so the whole issue is narrated by her, and I love that monologue about why she's doing what she's doing, and she says it's for love, and they have this whole monologue about, like, Adam and Eve and her saying, like, what was the first emotion? People would say loneliness, but really it's just the absence of love. And I thought that was a really cool monologue there, and it got me more attached to the villain, which is important because I felt like that was a part I didn't really like for the beginning of the series. And also you get what you're promised. You get Cassie Hack versus Vampirella, which was definitely a good fight. So overall, I thought this was a really solid issue, and if you've been following this series, you're finally kind of getting what you wanted with this book, at least in my opinion. So Hack & Slash vs. Vampirella issue 3 gets 4 stars. Moving on to number 4, which is All New Wolverine issue 28, which I love the Gabby scenes here. We finally get her superhero name, which is Honey Badger, but also some intense scenes too, where we do learn a bit more about Orphan X and Wolverine and her family just trying to survive and figure out ways to survive. So I really enjoyed this issue. I like that Laura's cousin and her aunt is kind of along the ride too, and I love that moment especially between Laura and her cousin saying, Laura's like, you know, I've done bad things, you know, I should be punished. And she's like, no, you saved my life, you know, I wouldn't be living here, so remember that. And I love those moments, just the character moments that really shine. Even Dakin and Laura's cousin, Dakin trying to flirt with her, and again, Gabby shining throughout every page she's in, just being adorable. So All New Wolverine issue 28 gets 4 stars, and that is number 4. Moving on to number 3, which was a surprising issue, Jean Grey issue 10. Damn, this was a heavy issue where we get to see this Jean Grey die. She's a skull when the Phoenix goes into her, and I love this whole issue. It actually explains like why we've been taking so long to build up to this moment. And Jean's like, oh well, it's never gonna kill me. It always want Jean. It's like, nope. We want the other Jean. So it was an interesting build up to a surprising ending, and gets me more pumped for Phoenix Resurrection and whatever this last issue of Jean Grey will be. So Jean Grey issue 10 gets 4.5 stars for me. I was pleasantly surprised with this issue. Moving on to number 2, which is the Archies issue 3, which is just so much fun. If you're a music fan, you definitely should be picking this up. If you're an Archie fan, you should definitely be picking this up. Also, I really enjoyed the Morning Glories and 4 kids walk into a bank little cameo. I thought that was kind of cool in the issue. But yeah, the artwork is so good. I love Joe Eisma on a lot of these Archie books. He does a great job with facial expressions, but also kind of making it cartoony, which totally works with Archie. But yeah, this issue we get to see Betty in the forefront, which you never expect because she's the tambourine player, you know? And I always wanted her to be more, but she is more here. She's like playing the guitar, she's writing a song, and Archie's not so happy about that until we get to see our guests, you know, tell Archie, hey, you're part of a band. You should be open to everybody's creative outlooks towards the band. And Archie's like, you're right. So you get this kind of interesting Betty and Archie moment. So I feel like it just embraces what it means to be in a band, what it means to love music. And you get to see that where, you know, they have this concert and 3 people show up, but still the time of their lives. So just such a fun book. I love it. The Archies issue 3 gets 4.5 stars, and that is number 2. Moving on to number 1, the obvious number 1, which is Runaways issue 4. I love this book. I love these characters. And it is so great to see Molly return. And, you know, the bubbliness of her character just leaps off the page. But what I loved about this issue the most was Gert. You know, Gert realizing that her friends have grown up and she needs to make a decision not to be with the Runaways anymore. She's been really pushing for the team to be together. But then after Molly saying, hey, I want to be here. This is, you know, I made a family here. She realizes, well, maybe I could make a family here too. And because the family I did have is broken, and she realizes that. And then also the plot with the main villain, is it Granny Hayes the main villain, or is Rainbow Rowell playing with our expectations of the parents being villains? And what does this mean about Molly's parents? Because obviously the cats have her eyes, you know, her mutant power. So what does that mean? You know, is Molly even a mutant? Those are a lot of the questions that the plot has here, but the character moments are just so good, and the artwork, I love the attention to detail with the outfits, the set design, just such a great book. And again, not just the artwork, but everything has such attention to detail and so many great character moments. So Runaways issue 4 gets 4.5 stars for me, and that is my pick of the week. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Comic Frontline. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. Don't forget to like my Facebook page. Also, description below, there are links for my comic book, Like Father, Like Daughter. And don't forget to like the Facebook page of Like Father, Like Daughter. And I'll see you guys later.